Kesubos. Yud Gimel.
Yud Gimel. That's correct. Yud Gimel.
Yud Gimel, right?
Yes, so just the context. The context that we're talking about is where you've got two sets of heirs from, one husband, two wives, and the children of those two wives are trying to divide up the Yerusha, and one of them has got a bigger shtar Banin Zefrin, and they're trying to assess if the total estate is worth more than the sum of the two Kesubos.
Right.
Which would then enable the children with the larger shtar Banin Zefrin to claim their full share.
If they were prospective assets, it is not like that in possession. Reb Shimon says, even if there are chattels, it is nothing, unless there is real property exceeding the two ketubos by a dinner. If one was married to three wives and he died, and this one's ketubah was 100 zuz, this one was 200, and this one was 300, there was only 100, and there was only a 100, they share equally. If there were 200, the one with the ketubah of 100 takes 50, the one with the ketubah of 200 take, and the one with the ketubah of 300 take 3 gold dinars each. If there were 300, the one with the ketubah of 100 takes 50, the one with the ketubah of 200 takes 100, and the one with the ketubah of 300 takes 6 gold dinars. Likewise, if three deposited money into a fund and they had a loss or profit, they share in this manner.
Okay, so now this is the famous Mishna. It's one of my favorite ones that I remember, if you recall, 4 years ago when I brought Prof. Aumann and his game theory that solved this Mishna. Because up until he came up with his game theory ideas, the Mefarshim were all over the place trying to work out what's the formula, because the formula just doesn't work.
Right.
It doesn't make sense, and they've given 3 discrete points of, like, if there's this much in the Yerusha, how much do you get? And it doesn't say, okay, so that's if you've got 200. What about if there's 250? What about if there's 275? Where does the money go? There's no straight line between any of these things until Prof. Aumann came up with a formula which relates these claims to the claim of the if you recall the Shnaim Ochzin. If you go to I can't remember, 2 people grabbing on the talus, and each one says it's mine, right? So what do you do if they're both holding onto it? Each one is claiming that it's theirs. You have to split it. You have to sell it and split the money between them, because there's nothing to divide between them. But if one of them says the whole thing is mine, and the other one says, no, we're partners in this, 50% is mine, 50% is his. So then what you do over there is you say, well, okay, so then they're both in agreement about one half that it belongs to the first guy, so he definitely gets that half. But they're arguing about the second half. Each one is saying about that half, it's all mine.
Yeah.
So therefore, they split that second half. So it goes 75-25 in that case, in favor of the guy who's claiming more. So what we have over here, by the way, these Kesubos, just as a preface to this case, these Kesubos are all dated on the same day. He married all 3 women at the same time, and but they've got different sized Kesubos.
3 women in the same day.
We're talking in theory.
I know.
But at any rate, Dr. Aumann has this whole paper which I showed about how he works out the formula, and how it works out that you could plug in the formula, and any amount that you want will be able to divide between all 3 women in the correct way. Anyway, I'm not going to dive into that too much. Let's move on to Mishna Hey.
All right. If one was married to 4 wives and he died, the first takes precedence over the second. The second takes precedence over the third, and the third takes over the fourth. The fourth swears to the second to the third, and the third to the fourth. But the fourth is paid without an oath. Ben Nanas says, should she profit because she is last? She too is not paid without an oath. If they were all written on one day, whichever one precedes the other is even by 1 hour, acquires the right to be collected first. Thus, in Yerushalayim, they would record the hours. If they were all written in the same hour, then there is only 100, they share equally. Simple enough.
Okay. Right. So now, now here's another interesting case. Isha haya nasoi shtei nashim. So man's got two wives. Okay, Rachel and Leah. Machar sadehu, and while he was alive, he sold a field that was on lien to the wives for the Kesubos. Okay, he sold his field. The kasva rishona lalokeh, but Rachel, who was the first wife that he married, okay, Rachel said to the buyer, "Don't worry about it. I have no claim on you." And she writes a star saying, "I have no claim." Okay, so you could imagine this happening with if the buyer says, "Hold on a second, you're married. You know, you've got a wife who's going to come and gazump me from buying this field."
Right.
So he brings his wife and says, "Rachel, write him a star that you have no claim." And so Rachel says, "Fine, no problem. I have no claim on this field." What he doesn't do, he doesn't bring Leah out. Okay, so now the buyer is sitting on the field, and the husband dies, and Leah comes and says, "I want my Kesubos. I never signed anything that said that I can't have the field." So Leah comes and gazumps the buyer. Now Leah is in possession of the field, and Rachel says, "Excuse me, I was the first wife. I have first right to this field." So she kicks Leah off the field because she's the first wife.
Right.
Then the buyer comes back to Rachel and says, "What are you doing on my field? You waived your right to this field," and he kicks her off. So we have an infinite circle over here. Okay, an infinite loop where the second one can take it from ad infinitum. So they're going to have to give up on kicking each other off and come and sit down around a table and say, "Okay, how are we going to settle this?" Okay. The same thing could work with a Baal Chov. Kahati explains if you had a similar situation where you have a creditor of a loan.
Right.
You've just joined on your cell phone, I think.
I hit the wrong button. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay, I hope we don't start getting a feedback loop.
I'm going to do that.
Anyway, so let's say you've got a creditor of a loan, and
Right.
and two purchasers. You
have a credit on the loan.
Right, so two purchasers, and so the borrower had two fields, right? And he sold the fields to two separate people. Okay, but now the creditor has got a lien on these fields because he lent him money based on those fields. And the two fields aren't enough. They don't cover the full amount of the loan. So the Malveh wrote to the second purchaser, Dinu Dvarim Ein Li Imach. He says, "I have no claim on you," right? So he can grab the field from the first purchaser because his chov is against both of the fields, so you can claim the one, and the first purchaser can grab the field from the second purchaser because he's supposed to have a part of the field, and the Baal Chov can then grab it again from the first purchaser, and then the second purchaser can take it again from the creditor because he's waived his rights. So again, that's one of those. It's a similar infinite loop, just dealing with a debt rather than with a Kesubos. Okay. So as we learned before, that there was a difference in opinions between the people of Yerushalayim and the Galil, who said that the widow is entitled to stay in the husband's house forever and live off the estate, whereas the people of Yehuda said that if the Yesomim want, they can just pay her out the Kesubos and kick her out. Okay. And now this is going according to either the opinions of the Anshe Yerushalayim Galil, or even perhaps according to those of Yehuda, where the Yorshim decide that they are going to let her stay. So the Almana Nizonis Minichse Yisomim, so the widow lives on the estate. Okay, but because she's getting mazonos from the estate, if she carries on working, then whatever she makes belongs now to the estate or to the orphans. Okay, that's Mazonos versus Maaseh Yadayim. Okay, but Ein Chayvin B'Kurasa, however, they have no obligation to bury her. Why? Because Kabura is going to get Kesuba. Right? In a situation where the wife dies before the husband, then the husband inherits the Kesuba. Okay, and his payment for getting because he's inherited the Kesuba, he now has to pay for her Kabura. Right. But in this case, he's already dead, and her Yorshim will take the Kesuba. Therefore, her Yorshim are responsible for the funeral. So that her heirs who inherit her Kesuba, they're the ones who are responsible for her Kabura.
I got it.
Okay. Almana bein mina erisin bein min nisuin. So she's a widow, whether she's widowed from erisin or from nisuin. Mocheres shelo bebeis din. So she is permitted to sell her husband's property that's on lien to her in order to get her kesuba, and she doesn't need the beis din to give her clearance to do it. She is allowed to go outside beis din to do it, and the presumption is that the husband would not have wanted his wife to debase herself by having to go and appear in front of the court and try and argue that she needs permission to sell the field. Mistama, he would have wanted her to be able to sell it without the permission of the court. Rabbi Shimon Omer min hanisuin mechoyeres shelo bebeis din. He agrees when it's after the chuppah. Min ha'eresin lo timkor. Excuse me.
Abroad.
Eresin lo timkor ela bebeis din. But if she was just married by Eresin, then she needs to go to court in order to sell it in Amazonas, because she isn't yet sustained from his. She's not being fed from his table yet, and he doesn't have to pay her. She's eating at in her father's house still. And his rule is that if a woman is not entitled to mazonas, then she must go to Beis Din if she wants to sell a field in order to pay for kesuba. Okay, the halacha does not follow Rabbi Shimon. It follows the Tanakama that it doesn't make any difference, that she is entitled to sell the field without permission of Beis Din. Okay.
All right.
Fine. Back to Zion tests.
Sorry, Zion test, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Bookmark came out, so that's why it's fine. As for a man upon whom bodily defects came about, he is not coerced to divorce his wife. Said Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, when does this apply? In the case of minor defects, but in the case of major defects, he is coerced to divorce her. After, and these are the ones that are concerned to divorce: a leper, one afflicted with an offensive nasal smell, one who gathers, one who mines copper, and a tanner, whether they had them before they were married or after they were married. Concerning all of them, Red Meir says, even if he had stipulated with her, she can say, I thought I would be able to endure it, but now I cannot endure it. He could come and say, however, she must endure against her will, except for a leper, because she causes his flesh decay. It once happened that Tana died, and a brother who was also a Tana, and he had a brother who was also a Tana. The sages say, she can say, your brother I could endure, but I cannot endure you. A woman to whom property fell before she was betrothed, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that she may sell it or give it away, or the act is valid. If it fell to her after she was betrothed, Beis Shammai says she may sell it. Beis Hillel, however, says she may not sell it, and they both agree that if she sold it or gave it away, the act is valid. Says Rabbi Yehuda. They argued about before Rabbi Gamliel, since he gains possession of the woman, should he not gain possession of the property? He replied to them, we are ashamed of the new property, and we wish to impose upon us the old property. If it fell to her after she was married, both agree that if she sold or gave it away, the husband should take it away from her buyers. If she fell to her before she was married and she subsequently married, Rabbi Gamliel says, if she sold or gave it away, the act is valid. Rabbi Hanina ben Akavia, said Rabbi Akavia, they argued before Rabbi Gamliel, since he gains possession of the woman, should he not gain possession of the property? She replied to them, we are ashamed of the new property, and you wish to impose upon us the old property. Reb Shimon distinguishes. That's it.
Actually.
Yeah.
Okay, vamos. With the base.
Yochanan ben Good Gidga testified that a deaf mute who was given in marriage by her father may be released by a bill of divorce. They said to him, "This one is also the same." If two deaf mute brothers were married to two deaf mute sisters, or to two competent sisters, or to two sisters, one a deaf mute and one competent, or two deaf mute sisters were married to two competent brothers, or the two deaf mute brothers, or the two brothers, one a deaf mute and one competent, these widows are exempt from chalitza and from yibum. If they were not related, they should marry, and if they then wish to divorce, they may. So this makes it seem, when they said the widows are exempt from chalitza and yibum, that it's more of a busha to the women to have to go through chalitza or yibum.
Say that again.
It almost makes it seem like when she says these widows are exempt from chalitza and yibum. So It seems like there's more of a busha for these women if they have to go through yibum or they have to go through chalitza.
They're exempt from it, meaning that they're allowed to remarry without chalitza or yibum.
I was thinking of the other way. I was thinking of it, like they really don't want to do this, but they, they don't know the guy too much. They don't know what
that into it. I mean, once they're exempt, then it's aser. As soon as because when you're talking about yibum, you're playing with fire. You're talking about your brother's wife. That's
right.
Occurrence.
Right. All right. I was thinking of the other. Okay. If two brothers, one a deaf mute and one a competent, were married to two competent sisters, and the deaf mute husband of the competent sister died, what should the competent husband of the other competent sister do? Nothing, because she is released as his wife's sister. If the competent husband of the competent sister died, what should the deaf mute husband of the other competent sister do? He must discharge his wife with a bill of divorce, and his brother wife is perpetually forbidden.
So that's where you stop. Hold on. This is your Mishna that we divide up in my Mishna over here.
So this is the first one, the last one.
So you finished at that case. The next case tomorrow starts with the two competent brothers married to two sisters. Okay.
Base Gimel Hay. If an animal died, one may not move it from its place. There was an incident, and they asked Rabbi Tarfon about this matter, and the Kala, which had about Kala, which had contracted tumor contamination. He entered the house of study and asked, and they said to him, he may not move them from their place. One may not be counted initially for the meat of an animal on Yom Tov, but we may be counted for its meat prior to Yom Tov and the slaughter and apportion it among ourselves. The Yehuda says a person may weigh meat against a utensil or against a chopper, but the Chachamim say we may not use a scale at all. We may not sharpen the knife on Yom Tov, but we may sharpen one against the other. A person might not say to a butcher, "Weigh me out a dinner's worth of meat," but he may slaughter an animal, and they may apportion the meat among themselves. And we have Maestros. Okay. We have Beis Hay. If one says to his fellow, "Here's the Issa, and give me for it 5 figs," he may not eat before tithing them. So says Reb Meir. Reb Yehuda says if he eats one by one, he's exempt, but if together he is liable. Reb Yehuda said it once happened in a rose garden in Yerushalayim that 3 or 4 figs were being sold for an Isser, and Truma and Meiser were never separated from them. If one says to his fellow, "Here is the Isser for 10 figs, which I shall select," and he may select and eat them. For a cluster of grapes that I shall select, he may pick the grapes and eat them. For a pomegranate that I shall select, he may eat the seeds and eat them. For a melon I shall select, he may cut slices and eat. But if he said to them, "For these 20 figs, for these 2 clusters of grapes, for these 2 pomegranates, for these 2 melons," he may eat them in his usual manner and is exempt because he bought them while they were still attached to the ground. If one hires a laborer to lay out figs and he said to him, "On condition that I may eat figs," he may eat and is exempt. On condition that my son alternately and my household may eat, and that my son may eat the equivalent of my wage, he may eat and is exempt. But if his son eats, he is liable. on condition that I may eat during the operation, and after the operation, he may eat during the operation, and it's exempt. If he eats after entitled to eat, thus by the Torah. This is the general rule. He is entitled to eat by the Torah is exempt, but he who is not entitled to eat by the Torah is liable.
That becomes a transaction, and as soon as it becomes a transaction, then it immediately it becomes chayav in Tremas and Masras.
Olios. Okay, Tetvav. Someone who touches a lightly sealed barrel full of tahor liquid that was made into a cover for a grave becomes tamei for 7 days. However, the barrel and the liquid remains tahor. Someone who touches an animal used as a cover for a grave becomes tamei for 7 days. And Ramea says a living being does not transmit tuma as a cover. If someone touches a corpse or utensils and forms a roof over a corpse and touches utensils, the utensils become tamei. If he forms a roof over the corpse and over utensils, he touches a corpse and forms a roof over utensils, the utensils remain tahor. If his hand is a handbreadth square, the utensils are tamei. There are 2 houses, each of which contains a piece of corpse, flesh half the size of an olive, and a person stretches his hand into the house. His hands are as big as a square handbreadth. Tuma spreads. If not, tuma does not spread. Okay. All movable items convey tuma when they are thick as a goad. Rabbi Tarfon said, "May I bury my children if this is not a mistaken ruling, which is a listener heard and misunderstood. The farmer was once walking with a goad on his shoulders, and when one end formed an ohel over a grave, the sages declared him tamei because the utensils sheltered a corpse." Rabbi Kiva said, "I will amend the ruling so that the words of the sages remain valid. All movable objects convey tuma, but the person who carries them when they are thick as a goad are upon themselves, even if they are very thin, and upon every other person or other utensils when they are a handbreadth wide." Good. Okay, and we have Avodah Zorah. We have hay base. If Nesek wine fell into the grapes, or onto the grapes, whether it fell onto the grapes, he should rinse them off and they are permitted. But if they were cracked, they are prohibited. If it fell onto dates or figs, there is enough in them to give taste, it is prohibited. There was an incident in which Botheus, the son of Zonin, brought dried figs by boat, and a barrel of Nesek wine broke, and the wine fell onto them. And he asked the Kukumen if they are permitted them. This is the rule. Anything that contributes to its enjoyment of the flavor in parts is prohibited, and anything that does not contribute to its enjoyment by the flavor in parts isn't permitted, such as a vinegar which fell into chopped beans. An idolater was helping a Jew transport cakes of wine from place to place. If there was a state of supervision, it's permitted. If he informed her that he was going far, it is prohibited. If there was time for him to puncture, patch, and allow it to dry, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says only if there was time for him to open and apply a new seal and allow it to dry. If one left his wine in a wagon or a boat, and he went by a shortcut and entered the city and bathed, it is permitted. If he informed her that he was going far, it is prohibited. If there was time for him to puncture, patch, and allow it to dry, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says only if there was time for him to open, apply a new, and allow it to dry. If one leaves an idolater in a store, even though he goes in and out, is permitted. If he informed him that he was going far, it is prohibited if there was time for him to puncture, patch, allowed to dry. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says only if there was time for him to open, and only a new seal and allow it to dry. Okay. All right. Okay. I will see you tomorrow, Mr. Shem. And we'll see if you post, pre or post.
We'll see.
Okay. Have a great day, Shul. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.